Not many people could say that they began political action and they were exposed to it before they remember, but I can. I was 2 years old when my father was arrested before my eyes. When I was 14, I went to see my mother at the Islamic Revolutionary Court in Tehran. She was a human rights activist, a human rights lawyer, and it was her first arrest. She was on the wrong side of justice this time. That when I came home, I wrote in my journal, as I used to, about the impressions that I had, and the troublemaker, activist journalist that my father was, took my writing and had it published in a reformist newspaper in Iran. I suddenly, overnight, became an influential voice at age 14. That is how I feel I joined my parents in their struggle for human rights in Iran. I always remember those 2 months that she was in prison because something happened in me. Something happened really deep. I think an activist was born in me. During the time when my mom was in prison, something else happened. I learned to campaign. I learned to campaign for my mother's freedom. Unfortunately, years later, we had to repeat that same campaign, this time for the freedom of my father, who was arrested and kidnapped and arrested for the 3rd time. And this time with my mother seeking the freedom of her husband. My parents' names were on the lists that were coming out by anonymous sources of the intellectuals to be killed. We were in hiding. My childhood was a happy one. My youth was a happy one. Yes, it was complicated, but it was happy. Day in and day out, the ideological machine tries really hard to diminish the childhood, the smiles, the ability to have fun, and they fail each time. When my mother was arrested during her interrogations, she was being threatened. They used her being a mother to threaten me. They said that they will hurt her daughter. And this is what pushed my mom to the edge, and that's how we left Iran, my mother and I. And that's how gradually exile began, which is an eternal form of displacement, which is peculiar, and which is there to stay when you, like me, choose to not let go. My father, who was a journalist and was kidnapped and arrested, and was under house arrest for many years, took his life in April 2011. We couldn't be with him. We couldn't be with him those last years. If we would go to Iran, we would get arrested. We were only allowed phone calls. Sometimes we would write him letters. And he was my best friend. Well, my upbringing was not based on anger. My upbringing was based on you work with what you have and you try to make the most of it. My love to all of those children of political prisoners. We will one day rise together.
I was raised in a very conservative town. My early battles started as a girl and then as a teenager in a patriotic, in many cases misogynist community and society. The first actual battle when I was 15, and I was told by some of my family members that I must wear the headscarf as all the women and the girls in my hometown. For some reason that really now I cannot tell why, I didn't, and I resisted. And I paid the price for that. And until very recently, I thought that I got all this harassment, which is not just sexual, they were actually touching my body in the street because I'm not wearing a veil, and I'm paying the price for that. I was the first woman in my province to decide to study journalism. Journalism is for men. The uprising for me was the time where I actually gained my space in the streets back. I was walking in the streets with more than 3,000 men on my own, chanting. None of them even dare to speak with me. Well, those who are overprotective came and say, like, dear sister, just go to the street side. We don't want you to get arrested or harassed or whatever. And then I was shouting, like, this is my right. I am here as you are. I have the same bravery that you have, so let me alone. Al-Raqqa, which is only known for being the capital of the caliphate. For me, Raqqa was the capital of freedom and revolution. I was amazed by the amount of women who were active in that town. Every CSO, every NGO that was working there had at least half of their staff or activists of women. They even established a feminist group who were active in that period of time. I do remember I was in a car passing by the main headquarters of ISIS then. So ISIS was there, but there were also other battalions, which are mainly local Syrians. And the women in the streets, they were walking without a headscarf, some of them even wearing like short skirts. And even those with headscarf, they were putting a very bright lipstick, like orange lipstick. Passing by those jihadis in the streets who are completely wearing black, this long Afghanis, looking them into the eyes, where the jihadis are just looking down and walking like very fast, passing them by. This is also on the Raqqa. And at that time, ISIS started arresting some journalists and activists. So me and two friends decided to hold these panels to really challenge them. In this panel, which is dated 10th of July 2013, so also before the world has heard about ISIS, which then eventually accused all Syrians of being pro-ISIS, well, that's a little proof that we really defeated, or at least tried to fight them before that. The main challenges, which I think my main trauma is not really about being barrel bombed, is not knowing the differences between the Sikhoi and M16, all these kind of different machine guns. My main trauma as a journalist is for suppressing myself and applying these different layers of censorship on everything that I do or post. This picture is the reason why I was kicked out eventually from the rebel-held Syria. At that time, when the Charlie Hebdo incident happened, and I decided to take a stand with the journalists who have been killed, doesn't mean I agree or disagree with them, it doesn't matter. What I'm sure of is that no one is supposed to be killed for whatever they do. And sadly, it wasn't only me who paid that price for this picture. It was like my entire family. Even my mom, who was living in Turkey, she was very much scared of whoever is knocking on the door. She was checking from the balcony before opening that door. And for some reason, the previous French president decided to say my full name in his speech about the Je suis Charlie incident without even checking with me. And my ex-partner was taken into Sharia court with the Holland speech and with this picture, and he was the one who has been put on the Sharia trial because his wife has decided to commit a blasphemy and support those who are drawing those things about the Prophet Muhammad.
Being strong is my only option. My life has changed so much because of the war. I have lost so many things. This is war. It forces you to start over. Surviving is not only about overcoming one unfortunate incident, but it's the art of resilience, hope, and strong will. December 2013, to a military hospital compound during an emergency visit for me and my work colleagues. A band of terrorists attacked that hospital during my visit. Bullets rained equally on everyone. And I can still hear the gunshots, the screaming actually after the gunshots. In that nightmare, 56 people lost their lives. 200 were injured. I lost 3 of my work colleagues, and I could have been one of them. After that, until today, we've been living off our suitcases as a single mother in exile and her little girl. Safety is a privilege. And in Yemen, nowadays, so is food. Yemen has become the worst place to live, especially if you are a woman. It is the worst humanitarian tragedy in the world. Up to 7 million people can no longer afford food, and they are actively starving. Mothers are searching for their disappearing sons. Women in besieged area are risking their lives, walking for hours just to provide food for their families. Girls who are revolting against hunger are beaten, detained, and abused. In 2015, I co-founded an organization called the Peace Track Initiative. We believe that peace will not fall from the sky, but it will come from the local communities. Although Yemeni women are really active on the local level, but they are largely excluded from the Yemeni peace process, especially at the official tracks. Peace cannot be granted. It is always something that you claim for. And this is what I vote to do. I have to have an answer for my daughter's question, when is the war going to end in Yemen? This is what I am doing. This is what I tell her when I travel, that your mommy is working really hard to bring peace to your country.
How would you describe the women activism that is going on in Iran today?
For every single thing that women have been deprived of in Iran, they have found a solution to challenge it. You would really see Iranian women as quite present, which what I find really ironic is that for this visibility and for this presence, sometimes the Islamic Republic takes the credit for it, that it actually has allowed women to be that visible, which is, I think, a mistake on the side of the international community, because for every single one of those small openings that you see, if at all, is because we have currently women in prison fighting for that, having fought for those rights. Women have become an integral part of fighting against repression.
What made you go into activism?
A lot of the push was really from my mother.
Can you talk a little bit about why was it important for you to train citizen journalists in Syria, and why was it important that women were among that group?
I decided that I want to pass over those things that I've learned to the others who are starting to become journalists. Being suppressed in so many terms is teaching you to be resilient, is teaching you to find your ways around that. And many of those women who I trained, at least 10 of them, are still living in Idlib and Aleppo, and they are still reporting and doing freelancing. And many of them are actually supporting their families from this career that 4 years ago they had no idea what it was, and they've never really thought that they would become journalists.
What is the situation now for many journalists in Syria, and where you yourself had to leave?
All the independent journalists or voices or activists are being attacked by all. They're all being put in danger, and they're not really getting the support that they're supposed to be getting from the international freedom of expression organizations.
Why do you think that women are still not included?
Women already now have their national peace and security agenda. They have their recommendations. They know exactly the roadmap towards peace. And if you leave it to the choice of the delegations, of course they will not have women among them.
Why not?
Because they're more like followers. We need to be on the front line. This is our right.
Sometimes it feels like the people are thinking we need to have the peace first, and then we can deal with gender equality.
This is absolutely not right, because if you're speaking about peace building, how would you build a peace without having the woman involved?
What can be the benefits of collaborating or learning from each other? Are the country situations so specific that it's really hard to get any advice from each other? Or
I think we share the same, let's say, obstacles.
Mm-hmm. We do face plenty of things that are in common because we're outspoken, we're women, we're from the region. Most of our communities are considered to be conservative. They don't really know how to handle that.
Well, I think the thing about being an activist or being brought up as an activist is that you think there's a solution to everything. So it's about finding the right approach, I think.
What are your strategies, if you want to share some of them with us tonight?
Helping others makes me happy, makes me, eager to do more.
How would you define stability for your countries?
I think no matter what happens in Iran, I'm going to be a pain in the neck of this government or the next government, because I think we have many years to fix our problems.
There is not going to be any kind of stability, neither in Syria or anywhere in the region, without justice, without accountability, without some kind of solutions for all those refugees who many of them would really come back when they know that they're not going to be arrested on the ways.
With Yemen, nobody is really bothered by the war in Yemen because we're not categorized as refugees.
Thank you. Thank you.